Throughout baseball history, there's been a select few pitchers who just don't give a fuck. Blessed with the superhuman ability to heave an object 100+ miles per hour and using it for evil. Laurent Legros once threw at Bert Campaneris just because he was 3 for 3 that day. Campaneris responded by throwing a bat at his head. Mark McLemore got thrown at just for calling timeout. Some pitchers love doing this, even knowing it's going to cause a full-on brawl. Throwing at people just for bunting, just for being good, or just for this. Throwing at people just for fun and intimidating the fuck out of them. But which MLB pitcher was the scariest of them all? Well, it definitely wasn't this guy. Calling time is part of the sport. Before recently, a batter could call time as many times as he wanted. However, some pitchers will try to kill you for doing it. Jared Weaver throws a pitch and seems annoyed. Then, when he looks up to throw another, Kyle Seager isn't even looking at him. Then, he puts his hand up. In the words of Jared Weaver, quote, like he's fucking Derek Jeter. Calls time and apologizes, but Weaver doesn't accept. They exchange words, then it looks like someone in the dugout says something to Weaver. He stares at them and probably thinks, watch this. Seager calls time again, then says he's fucking ready and immediately gets drilled. Hitting MLB pitching is impossibly hard. Try doing it while knowing the guy you're facing might also throw a potentially life-altering pitch at your head just for calling time. This intimidation game can turn an average pitcher into a great pitcher. However, Weaver only threw this pitch 82 miles per hour, so in no world could he ever be considered the scariest. Rob Dibble, on the other hand, has an argument. 6'4", weighing over 230 pounds, throwing over 100 miles per hour in the late 80s, early 90s. That alone made him one of the most intimidating pitchers in the league. The fact that he regularly threw at people was just a cherry on top. Before he even debuted, he made headlines for throwing a bunch of chairs into a pond. Then, in his first month, he hit Willie Randolph on purpose and got fined. In his second month, he hit Terry Pendleton on purpose and got fined. 2 months later, he drilled Tim Tuffle, who charged the mound, and a fight broke out. Rob Dibble had to be contained by multiple players, and the brawl subsided. A minute later, Dibble got free and went back for round 2. Dibble took the league by storm. In his first 3 seasons, he couldn't be touched. He led relievers in K per night, had the most WAR, had the second lowest ERA. Opponents only hit 181 against him. And in these 3 years, he also served 18 days of suspension for fighting and throwing at people. He once threw near a guy's head and got suspended because it started a full-on brawl with the Brewers, then got released and signed with the Brewers, meaning he had to serve his suspension on the Brewers for starting a fight with the Brewers. But this kind of thing was normal for Dibble. He'd throw 100 miles per hour near your face just to scare you, and hitters don't like that. Eric Yelding charged the mound on him for this, and Dibble gladly met him there. One time, Doug DeCenzo tried to sacrifice bunt on him, successfully laying down a bunt and scoring a run. Dibble found this so annoying. Instead of just throwing the ball to first and getting an easy out, he chucked it at DeCenzo as hard as he could and was kicked out of the game for doing it. One time, after getting a save, Dibble was so mad he chucked a ball 400 feet into the second deck, hitting a first-grade teacher in the arm. And this was after a successful outing. Dibble really just didn't care. Everybody knew it, and it scared them. And the best example of that is the guy literally beat up his own manager. Yes, Rob Dibble fought his own manager in the clubhouse, and it's all on camera. After a game in September, the media was confused as to why Dibble wasn't put into the game, which ended in a 3-2 score. The manager explained that Dibble had a sore shoulder and couldn't pitch. Dibble said that was a lie, his shoulder was fine, confronted his manager, and a fight broke out in the locker room between him and his skipper. Rob Dibble fought his own boss on camera and not only did not get fired, he pitched 2 days later. However, Dibble had no finishing move, no submission, and landed no significant strikes, so that takes him out of the running for most intimidating pitcher. In order to be the most intimidating pitcher in baseball, you need to be capable of beating up an elderly man. Lenny Randle one time attacked his own manager, punched him in the face repeatedly, fractured his cheekbone because he didn't want to be the backup. He also bunted one time just so he could destroy a pitcher while running to first. However, he is a position player and doesn't qualify. Anthony Rendon once grabbed a man by the collar after a game. However, this man is older than Rendon, is not quite elderly, and that leaves Pedro Martinez. He one time threw a 72-year-old Don Zimmer to the ground in the middle of a brawl in a Yankees vs. Red Sox game. Why Zimmer targeted Pedro specifically? Because Pedro was obsessed with throwing at people. At one point, he was so small that Dodgers threatened to fine him if they saw him jogging for exercise. At one point, weighing less than 140 pounds, yet might have been in more brawls than any other pitcher in baseball history. In a game against the Rays, he felt Gerald Williams was standing too close to the plate. Not only was Gerald Williams not even standing that close to the plate, he was the first batter of the game. But Pedro wanted to send a message. Don't crowd the plate when Pedro Martinez is pitching. What ensued was a full-on brawl where Pedro Martinez didn't fare too well. But after getting in a brawl on the first batter of the game, Pedro went on to pitch 8 no-hit innings, taking a no-hitter into the 9th inning. Pedro not only scared batters by being one of the nastiest pitchers in baseball history, he was also kind of addicted to hitting people. In 1994, over half of his starts featured an ejection because he refused to stop pitching inside. He led the league in hit by pitches and got ejected 12 times in his 4 seasons in Montreal. If you called time right before he was about to pitch, he'd throw at you, even if he knew it could start a brawl. When Roger Clemens hit Kevin Millar, Pedro responded by throwing at Alfonso Soriano and Derek Jeter, both in the head and hands area, saying later, quote,
"Send them both in the same ambulance to the hospital."
Pedro once hit a batter on the Padres, but that wasn't enough. He then threw 1 inches from Derek Bell's head. Bell thought about charging the mound, but didn't. Then Pedro stuck him out. Instead of charging the mound, he went to the dugout, waited for Pedro to stop paying attention, then charged the mound 20 seconds after the hit by pitch. Pedro himself says that when he hit a batter, 90% of the time it was on purpose, meaning, according to Pedro Martinez, he hit an estimated 151 batters on purpose throughout his career. But if you hit him with a pitch on purpose, he didn't like that. Pedro Martinez is one of the few pitchers in baseball history who charged the mound while hitting. Pedro's intimidation tactics caused nearly a dozen mound charges, but what's even more intimidating is a guy like Aroldis Chapman. He's had 0 on the mound confrontations because nobody in their right mind would ever charge the mound against this guy. He's 6'4" and seemingly growing bigger every single season. Aroldis Chapman threw a fastball 105 miles per hour last year at 36 years old. A Cuban boxer illegally escaped a dictatorship just for a chance to play in MLB, and off-the-field assault accusations all add to the intimidating reputation. But the real fear comes from the fact that he threw 106 mile per hour fastballs and most of the time had no fucking idea where it was going. He's responsible for one of the most terrifying innings ever pitched in baseball history. He comes in throwing 100 miles per hour, strikes out a guy who has no chance. The next batter watches a 101 mile per hour fastball almost kill him, got up, collected himself, then watched another 100 mile per hour fastball come within inches of hitting him in the face. The Cubs dugout is freaking out and yelling at him, and he stares them down and laughs, then throws 3 straight 100 mile per hour fastballs right down the middle, and the guy has no chance. Proceeds to stare down the Cubs dugout as they scream even louder. Then Chapman completely loses control, throws a 101 mile per hour fastball inches from John Baker and walks him on 4 extremely wild pitches. Baker literally thanks God that he didn't get hit by any of these pitches. The Cubs finally make contact and a ground ball ends the inning. Chapman dismisses them and the bench is clear, but for obvious reasons, nobody comes close to throwing a punch at Chapman. Over 15 years, a batter has come to the plate to face Chapman 3,113 times. 40% of the time, this ends in a strikeout. That is the highest strikeout percentage in baseball history. He's also had seasons where he's walked close to 20% of the batters he's faced. At times, he has absolutely no control or any idea of where his fastball is going, which is absolutely terrifying because this is a guy who threw a pitch 106 miles per hour, the fastest pitch ever thrown in human history. Basically, Chapman's arm possesses the ability to end somebody's life, and he almost has multiple times, because at least according to some of his opponents, he has no problem throwing at your fucking head. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Factor, a meal service that delivers straight up delicious meals directly to your door. Factor has been sponsoring the channels for a few years now, and I've been eating it ever since. We're all busy and cooking takes forever. With Factor, I can skip the trip to the grocery store, skip the chopping, skip the prepping, and the cleaning too. Every meal is fresh and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. It's mind-blowing how delicious these meals really are. They have over 35 meal options per week. They have keto options, calorie smart options, vegan and veggie options. They even now have gourmet plus meal options if you're craving something special. Personally, I've enjoyed every meal I've eaten from Factor, so I really don't think you could go wrong. The delivery is quick and easy, the cooking process is even easier, and the cleaning process almost doesn't even exist. And now it's even cheaper than ever. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50BaseballDoesn't to get 50% off your first Factor box. Yes, 50% off, and all you have to do is click the link below and use code 50BaseballDoesn't. Do it right now. In a game in Cleveland, Nick Swisher came to the plate. Chapman chucks the first pitch 100 miles per hour over everybody's head into the backstop, likely an accident because in the words of his manager, quote, Chapman does that about once a game, but Swisher stares him down for this, thinking Chapman was sending a message. In return, Chapman throws one 100 miles per hour inches from his face. In response to this attempted murder, Swisher stares him down and yells at him, then flies out and they exchange more words, but nothing ever happens because, like I said, nobody, not even Nick Swisher, is dumb enough to charge the mound on this guy. But on the basis of never throwing at someone for getting a hit, bunting on him, or simply just existing, we cannot call Chapman the most intimidating pitcher ever. Not when there's pitchers like Bob Gibson, who once threw a pitch at a batter in an old-timers game because that guy hit a home run off him decades earlier in an actual game. He also threw at a guy at an old-timers game because that guy hit a home run off him in an earlier old-timers game. Bob Gibson once threw at a guy because he pulled an outside pitch for a hit. He would throw at batters just for pulling outside pitches. No matter what you did, Gibson would find a reason to throw at you for it. He was the most intimidating pitcher in an era where almost all pitchers tried to intimidate in some way. When asked if he would throw at his own mother, Early Wynn said, quote, depends on if she's crowding the plate. If Ryan Duran had a beef with you, he would famously throw at you while you were in the on-deck circle, because that way you didn't get to go to first base. Juan Marichal was a pitcher, but was so tough when he was thrown at while in the batter's box, he charged the mound with his baseball bat. Yet somehow, none of these pitchers are as scary as Carlos Zambrano when he was in a bad mood. He gave up 5 runs to the Braves in a bad outing, then freaked out on his catcher and fought him in the dugout. After giving up a go-ahead homer to the Cardinals in the 8th, Zambrano was pissed. Jim Edmonds was up next, so he just hit Jim Edmonds with a pitch on purpose because he was pissed. In a different game, he gave up 8 runs to the Braves and wanted to leave the game. His manager didn't want to take him out of the game, so instead, he just threw at Chipper Jones and got ejected. The Braves were pissed and came out to confront Zambrano. He was already gone. He packed his bags and said he was retiring. He later decided not to retire. Zambrano had such a bad temper, his own team not only suspended him, they made him go to anger management classes for 8 months, cause he had freakouts like this. After this call, he got in an umpire's face, bumped him, and got ejected. Nope, you're ejected. Zambrano ejected the umpire, then chucked a ball 400 feet over the outfield wall, went to the dugout, and proceeded to destroy a Gatorade machine. And this poor Gatorade machine had no chance, kind of like this bird. In this legendary video, you can see one of the scariest people on earth accidentally hit a bird with a 1,000-mile-per-hour fastball. This is Randy Johnson. He is 6'10", throws 102 miles per hour, basically sidearm. He threw so hard that in the case of a home invader, he would keep a bucket of baseballs next to his bed, so if a robber entered his room, he would just start pelting them with 100-mile-per-hour fastballs. That was Randy Johnson's home protection. The angle, trajectory, and speed in which his pitches were thrown put absolute fear into batters. His insanely long limbs allowed him to have a release point that was basically behind a lefty's back. In an all-star game, he once sailed one over Larry Walker's head. He was so tired of risking his life against Randy Johnson, he put on his helmet the wrong way and faced him righty. In a different all-star game, he threw a similar pitch to John Kruk. He is visibly terrified, but he has to keep hitting. Comes back and stands in the very back of the box, takes strike 1, and knows he has no chance. Then swings at misses at strike 2 and looks absolutely ridiculous. Then swings at strike 3 with one of the most ridiculous swings you'll ever see. And this was an all-star. These kind of swings weren't uncommon. People were so afraid to get hit by his fastball. When he ended up throwing a slider, they would put up some of the most ridiculous scenes ever seen in Major League Baseball. But unlike the people I've mentioned already, Johnson wasn't even trying to be intimidating. He was just massive, threw fast, and was very wild for much of his career. He rarely, if ever, threw at people or even near people on purpose, unless you were someone like Kenny Lofton, who got mad at this errant pitch. Randy basically charged Lofton so he could scream in his face. The benches cleared, but after some shoving, the game resumed, and Randy threw another one right next to his face. This was likely on purpose, and after the second bench clearing incident, he was ejected. But Randy Johnson is not quite qualified to be called the most intimidating pitcher ever, because most of his scariness just came from his domination. He rarely, if ever, threw at anyone on purpose, and his intimidation was not intentional. Al Hrabosky was the opposite. Anybody who calls themselves the Mad Hungarian is intimidating. Here's a clip of him fighting a reporter with his shirt off on the field before a game.
Hey, you ever say what you said that one? Yeah.
Yeah, you little.
This guy created an entire persona to strike fear into batters. He grew a Fu Manchu. When his team tried to make him shave it, he flipped, filed a grievance with the Players Association, and eventually got suspended for his Fu Manchu, saying his Fu Manchu is what made him successful, that it struck fear in batters, saying, how am I going to convince them I'm a dangerous hitman if I look like a golf pro? Al Hrabosky was putting up a 6 ERA, feared he was going to be out of the league, then decided to just start acting like a crazy person. He'd enter a game, rub the ball as hard as possible, pound the ball into his glove like a psycho, then almost instantly started dominating. From this point on, people started calling him the Mad Hungarian. However, this intimidation tactic took forever and pissed people off. Bill Madlock, annoyed with the long routine, just decided to walk out of the box. Then, when he walked back into the box, the Mad Hungarian would just repeat his entire routine over again. This went on for a while, and the umpire got annoyed and just said, play ball. The manager came out to argue, and the Mad Hungarian just started pitching with no one in the box. The ump then called a strike with the manager in the batter's box. The guy on deck then tries to hit for some reason, almost gets hit in the face, starts a fight with the catcher, a brawl breaks out, and the Mad Hungarian was in the mix looking for trouble. One time, he didn't like the ball, so he threw it in. The umpire threw him a new one. He didn't like this one either, so the ump chucked another one past his head. Herboski stared him down, rolled the ball in, so the umpire just rolled a ball back to Herboski, and the game started. He once chucked a ball over the head of a batter, then proceeded to get into a fight with Lee Mazzilli, who wasn't even hitting. He was the guy on deck. This skirmish went on for a while, and he was so mad, he rage-kicked the rosin bag. Lee Mazzilli then proceeded to come to the plate and hit a bomb off him, but Herboski was so mad, he tried to fight a guy who just hit a homer off him. Throwing at a batter for being better than you may seem weak, but some will hit you for less. Some pitchers will throw at you just for bunting, just for calling time, and just for doing this. And Nolan Ryan would do all of the above. Yes, even an action as small as this would set him off. Famous for throwing at any batter who would dig into the box. If he caught you digging your cleats into the dirt, he'd throw at you. By the way, it is literally impossible to step into a batter's box without digging your cleat into the dirt at least a little bit. So every single batter who faced Nolan Ryan was paranoid they'd get hit just for stepping in the box. Not to mention, this is a guy who threw 100 miles per hour in the 70s. If you bunted on him, he would almost, without fail, throw a pitch at you or near you the next time you came to the plate. Also, if you ever got down 0-2 to Nolan Ryan, that meant you were getting thrown at. He would throw pitches inches from batters' heads just because he was up 2 strikes and could afford to throw a ball and knew it would scare them. Basically, no matter what you did, Nolan Ryan took it as an excuse to throw a ball at you or near you. And if you wanted to do something about it, that wasn't smart either. Just ask Robin Ventura, who famously charged the mound and was put in a headlock and struck repeatedly by Nolan Ryan, who was 46 years old at the time. Robin Ventura was 21 years younger than Nolan Ryan at the time of this altercation. Ryan was a tough guy. He literally used rattlesnake oil to heal his sore arm. In one of his 7 no-hitters, he was so dominant, the Tigers felt so helpless, the last batter of the game literally came to the plate with a leg from a table he got from the clubhouse. The umpire stopped the game and told him he couldn't use a table leg to hit with, and he said, quote, "Why not? I'm not gonna hit him anyway." He then got a regular bat, struck out for the last out of the game. It was Nolan Ryan's 17th strikeout to complete a no-hitter. But somehow, even that doesn't seem as impressive as the time that Nolan Ryan got hit in the face with a ball, started bleeding from his face, then proceeded to stay in the game, throw a complete game, and waited till after the game to go to the hospital to get 7 stitches. And the pure and utter ruthlessness, cruelty, and straight up domination is what makes Nolan Ryan the most intimidating pitcher in baseball history.